Is there a consulting work that you do for the firm that you are actually hiring these roles for?
So most firms are struggling to even define the singular exact opportunity that they have.
What are those subtle filters that you use to evaluate whom to progress and whom to not?
When an exec search professional calls, you must always have a conversation.
So what is the trust factor that drives this whole process?
Usually, we do not disclose information. However, we are also careful to not share the candidate's personal information.
Most leadership advice sounds good, but very little of it is real. Real leadership, as per me, isn't learned from a playbook. I learned it from mistakes that I made in my work. I learned it from the wrong decisions that I took. I learned it in moments which nobody ever prepared me for. Leadership Unboxed strips leadership down to a level that it really, really matters. How leaders are assessed, how potential is evaluated, how leaders who will follow growth versus stagnate are separated. The lot that does it, the executive search professionals. Very critical component in the whole hiring process. If you want to really lead with intention and not just with time, you have arrived at the right place, because we are going to discuss with leadership recruiting professionals about their executive search initiatives on various topics like humility, like executive presence, like the hiring traits they look for, how to really work on your resume, and a whole lot of different things that will come extremely handy when you start preparing for the next big change in your career. Welcome to Leadership Unboxed.
Hi, Pamela. Good morning.
I am doing good. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak to me. Gaurav, before we dive into the topic, it would be really interesting to know what prompted you to pursue a career as an exec search professional, and tell us a little bit about your background.
So it's been over 14 and a half years that I've been doing this. So I manage Asia Pacific for a global executive search firm called Catanol. This happened by accident. I had no intention of actually exploring an exec search, job opportunity, if I may, but this is something that came through my network. It seemed to be challenging. It seemed to be interesting. It was a sense of adventure that brought me into this industry. Of course, what helped give me confidence that this is something I could do is my background in management consulting. So I worked with Cognizant Business Consulting in a group called Strategic Services prior to this. So that was essentially internal strategy as well as external consulting. Spent some time in the US. Before which I did my MBA from Indian School of Business, Hyderabad, and worked as a techie with Infosys for close to 4.5 years prior to that. I'm an electronics and communications engineer otherwise. So that's been my journey, Pamela.
If we really take it from the bottom, right? Engineering, then a management graduate from a top tier school, then working in the tech world, doing management consulting, and then shifting to exec search. If we were talking in a different context of exploring career transitions, you are a perfect example to show how people can really traverse a transitioning journey. But great path and great choice, I'm sure, and we will learn a lot from you about this intriguing secret sauce of hiring, because a lot of mid-career professionals who are looking for recommendation, advice, guidance, coaching, mentoring, they really want to explore the exec search space in a way that they can come in the radar of these professionals. Let's start from the top. Okay, when you're evaluating leaders, what does search actually mean to you? Like, I'm assuming you will have a mandate for which you are sourcing for a role, but is there anything before that mandate comes? Like, is there a consulting work that you do for the firm that you are actually hiring these roles for? And when you come to sourcing these roles, how do you really decide the evaluation criteria?
Yeah, absolutely right. So most firms are struggling to even define the singular exec opportunity that they have. And I say singular because, at CXO levels, especially your functional heads, people may be hiring for the first time or may have hired and not succeeded because they did not, one, define the specs properly, and two, therefore, find the right person for the job. So there are a lot of instances where clients want to pick our brains to understand what they need, and that's a consultative dialogue that we have with the clients to understand the context, the strategic roadmaps. Why is it that they want to hire for the position? What is it they want to achieve by hiring for the position? Basis our experience of having placed different candidates before and having worked in that particular industry, as well as the local market knowledge, we are able to help them define what they need. That's step one. Step two is, once we've jointly sort of made a spec for the position, that feeds into everything that we do next, which is essentially where we're going to look for the candidate, what are we going to evaluate the candidate on. This is both quantitative hard fit as well as personality or softer fit analysis that we do on the candidate's profile. Yeah, I mean, That in brief is what how we go about things.
So there would be a job description that you collectively come up with after your consultative approach with the client, right? And this job description usually never goes on websites or job boards because these are all invisible leadership hiring, right? So when you really talk to candidates, how do you communicate the job description? Do you really hand off a description to them? Or because it's both ways, right? You are evaluating a candidate is also evaluating the opportunity. So
The latter, of course, I think any position where you're just handed off a job description is not important enough. So we do not even mention the name of the client when we have a first conversation with the potential candidate. We want to sort of peel the onion, so as to say, one layer at a time by sharing some information, gauging the reaction, understanding from the questions, from the responses to our evaluation fit, or whether the candidate is really in the ballpark of what we are looking at or not. And of course, we are once the candidate is found to be a good fit and we are convinced that this is a person we want to take forward, we share all the information about the position, but in a way that one piques the interest of the candidate, but two also gives us enough information to say that, hey, this is somebody worth taking into the process further. And of course, several evaluations follow. This is the first conversation that I'm talking about.
And before we get into the evaluation process itself, right, and understand how it works, there are a lot of people who are very curious to know how will they come in your radar. Like in the first place, coming into the talent pool where you will consider them for a role. How does it really work? Unpack it for us, because that's the best kept secret where exec search professionals have come forward in these kind of conversations and said that, we use our own database, which we build over a period of years. But what is your way of really building that talent pool? And if people want to come in your radar, what should they do?
Firstly, there's no one source from where we get our target candidate, because every search is different. There is no singular database that we rely on, including our own. The search is tailored to the mandate that is offered. I think what a candidate can do, therefore, is to ensure that they have put their best foot forward as far as the internet presence goes. And when I say that, there's a basic search engine optimization that you can do on your profile, where you ensure that whenever there are important keywords, say you're a sustainability, you want to ensure that ESG features on your profile well. You've shared articles of ESG. You've written something on the topic and you've attended the conferences and therefore are on the top of the ESG search pile when a position comes through. And that's just an example. Whatever is relevant for your industry, your function, I think you should be featuring amongst the top. There's a saying that, the best place to hide a dead body is the second page of Google. You don't want to be on the second page of Google search.
I'll just summarize what I heard. It is more like having a social presence in the professional space so that people are, when they look for a specific candidate, you automatically match to that criteria because of A, having the right competencies, and B, also showcasing those competencies on the right places so that you are searchable. If somebody is looking for you, you should be found one step at a time. We understood how you get the mandate, you build the job description, reach out to people, then you filter these candidates. So when you're filtering people, right? And I'll tell you a little bit about my own experience. Okay, this was many years back. I was a young leader at that time, and the exec search firm called. I had no idea what exec search firms do. In those days, we used to think, koi external agency, it's like a recruiter who is sourcing people on behalf of the brand. And I just didn't take this person seriously, right? So she was asking me a lot of questions and I was not willing to answer a lot of it, assuming, okay, this is like a third party layer between me and the brand that's hiring me. And because I did not understand how to interact and how to share information in a conducive way, I was still a good candidate, but I couldn't crack the interview because probably I took a lot of things on my own. And this was a very big automotive brand and they were looking for a general manager. I was a young leader. I still didn't crack the interview because this exec search professional probably used a recruitment filter and she did not coach me as much as I now understand the relationship goes with search professionals, and I lost that opportunity. Coming back to the conversation, when you really talk to these candidates, what are those subtle filters that you use to evaluate whom to progress and whom to not?
What a great question, Pamela. It's a very nuanced one. And I'm going to sort of congratulate you first that this is a topic which is going to really benefit anybody, any candidate who's listening. When an exec search professional calls, you must always have a conversation. Not just because that particular opportunity today would be of interest, but because this person would be your conduit to n number of opportunities. So if I was not in this industry and I was a candidate, I would definitely have a conversation, know about not just the client, but also about the firm. What other possible mandates could they have
Correct.
present, and how could I stay in touch? I think one of the legacy reasons that exec search firm or people calling from exec search firm consultants are not taken very seriously is there was a glut of recruitment firms post 2000, and it became a little annoying for people to receive like tens of calls a day, and that sort of put the whole industry in a lower paradigm. However, one must understand that exec search is very, very key function to further your career, and you must also be aware of which are the good exec search firms around.
Correct.
So just to have those names at the top of your head is a great thing, because if somebody were to call you, please entertain that call with utmost sincerity. Share information. Of course, there are some confidential details that you may not want to share, and that's a great filter also for us to know that the candidate is very credible candidate who's willing to share information till such point that it's not breaching his own employment ethics and contract. Being upfront with the exec search person will help you create an ally who will not only further your case but handhold you through what is otherwise dark process, and it's meant to be dark, right? It's not something that can be overtly transparent. It's a selection after all. But being polite, humble, and forthcoming is going to only help your cause towards at least that opportunity in question, if not further opportunities.
Okay. Now, a very interesting thing, and this just came to my mind as we are speaking. When I, as a sales professional, talk to my clients and we want to do, say, a proof of concept or take the conversation further, the client says, okay, now that I have to really give you my data or access to my information within the organization, these are all discrete stuff, you need to sign an NDA, right? Now, this, if we just flip this and come to the talent recruitment piece, when senior leaders are hired, I'm sure the hiring team would have to divulge a lot of information so that there is give and take, right? Maybe there's a case study. You ask if you're hiring for a CFO for a maybe a Series C startup, you probably have to ask him to present what is his plan for the next 30, 60, 90 or the 3 years. So he needs credible information to be able to do that presentation. Is there anything in the exec search bit that goes into giving confidence to the client or the customer of yours for whom you're hiring, that whatever information you share will not go out, or it's a unsaid norm in the industry that, okay, the candidate will not divulge all this outside? So what is the trust factor that drives this whole process?
Again, a very interesting question. There's no one way to handle this, but usually we do not disclose information, confidential information, until such time that both us and the client are confident that this is a candidate that we want to take into the advanced rounds of. However, we are also careful to not share the candidate's personal information. We would give a broad spec of the candidate's profile to the client as well. When the client gives a green signal that this is somebody they would really be interested in further dialogue, is when we will share all the information with both sides. I think it's only fair not to put all the onus of confidentiality on one party. I think both parties are equal in that sense. But there are instances where the candidates also have to sign an NDA to progress further. We as search partners have to also sign off on confidentiality matters. There are some things we may not disclose to the candidate at all, but need to know because we need to understand the context fully to be able to search well.
Okay. Now, the search space itself is quite, as you said, mid 2000, a lot of firms popped up, right? And I have also noticed a pattern when I was trying to put this podcast together. A lot of good search professionals have left big organizations and have opened independent search practices, like their own firms. So now the whole search space is quite populated. And what I hear from many people in this space that there's something for everyone because there are so many mandates coming. There's huge growth in the Indian economy or in the Asia Pacific economy as such. So what is your take on this? Like, despite the fact that people are moving out, opening their one solopreneur kind of search businesses because they have database, right? They're moving out with the database. What's your take on the industry itself? We're just switching gears, moving from the whole candidate process into the industry.
Yeah, I think the industry is characterized by quite a few players. There is right at the bottom of sort of the value chain, if I may, is the staffing industry where you help companies hire 10 staff at a relatively lower end of the salary spectrum. Then there are companies who do mass hiring, RPOs, of everything, right? These are typically large firms, both international as well as Indian firms, who take the bulk of the hiring away from the the companies, the clients. These names may be prominent because they are omnipresent, but they do not necessarily do the exec search. In fact, they cannot, because structurally they are geared up to do mass hiring, which requires a lower level of diligence, more speed, have to deliver at relatively lower cost per hire, right? So that's the metric. Then comes the segment of where we operate, which is exec search. Exec search itself is characterized by three kind of firms, is what you mentioned. Very small mom and pop kind of exec search firms, where people who have good networks, specialty in particular industry, just decide that this is something they want to do for the rest of their days. They do not necessarily pursue too much market share. They are content with whatever network they have, and the network keeps giving them repeat business. Then there are both international and Indian search firms of mid-size who cater to the mid-market, so small and medium-sized companies. Very, very useful for that segment, because that's a segment which does not necessarily have the brand identity of large multinationals or global players, but still have a decent size, great aspiration, and fantastic growth path ahead. So they still want a very professional approach to exec search. That's the space in which we operate. And then there are really large global exec search firms, so typically American billion-dollar firms who speak to the Fortune 500 clients. The conversations and contracts are usually finalized in global locations. Of course, they have very competent India arms as well, but they are very sensitive to the levels at which they operate. So they typically draw their minimum compensation levels above maybe 150 or 200,000 USD. These guys, they work for, or their contracts allow them to work repeatedly for very large clients, really occupy the highest level value that can be extracted from the industry. So I believe there's a space for everyone while it's populated. But I think a discerning client must understand, one, for which level and for which kind of position in their industry and their context, or which is the firm that they should leverage. I think that has still not percolated very clearly, in my opinion. So there's education that we have to also do in the process. Some is education by discovery. The clients realize that, hey, it's not working out with this mass recruiter, although they have a global name and fame. And then they come to a player like us, where we still give it an exec search treatment without charging them an arm and a leg, so to say.
Okay, nice. Now we'll flip this a little bit on the candidate side, right? As we come to the close of the conversation. Now, there are so many types of exec search firms, so many types of search firms, I would rather say, the pyramid that you described, right? Or the value chain. Now, going to your first part of the conversation, they should be present on the internet, right? If you have interacted with any LLM or these chat GPTs, right? When you try to optimize your own profile, you have to define your audience, target audience. When I look at the target audience, the mandates come from the PE firms, come from the actual clients that you have, and the mandates could come from, I don't know if it really works like that, where they outsource the mandate to you, like one search firm outsources to another search firm because of the specialty that you bring to the table. But there are so many different categories of subsets of crowd who may be looking at leaders with a different lens. If somebody is trying to really optimize their profile, what would be one practical takeaway for them from this conversation that should they really focus on, despite the diverse set of target audiences that they have to impress and optimize for, to ensure that they get picked up, or they get headhunted, for a specific role? What should they do?
This is an absolute pro tip. So I'm going to, if your audience has made it this far in the podcast, they have a bonus coming in. Look at the job description of the company, of the position that you want to get into. Use the keywords in the job description. Those are the keywords with which the internet is going to be scoured. And if you have those on your profile, you're probably going to hit the top of the list. It's as simple as that.
Yeah. But what if these job descriptions are not even available?
Okay, then you look at the offerings of the companies that you want to get into. Look at the terminology they use. Use the same terminology, and not the terminology of the company that you work in. Your aspiration is to get into a company. If you appear to speak the same language, then you're going to seem very, very to what the company requires.
So the lingo matters, the terminology,
absolutely,
the industry
absolutely.
uses.
Of course, you have to still clear all the evaluations that will ensure, but at least you will hit the first filter.
Okay. And if people want to really improve their network, my last question to you, if they want to improve their network by staying close to exec search professionals, because a requirement can pop at any time, right? And the timing may not be right. With so much of volatility in the market with respect to leadership, we often see a lot of senior people displaced, trying to reskill and look for a change. What is the best way to network? Just a cold outreach on LinkedIn, or actually building relationship, meeting people, trying to tell them on what this person brings to the table and try to understand where the industry is trending?
Hey, look, I never forget a candidate I've met in person. So there's no replacement for meeting somebody face to face or having a very sincere, clear conversation. And it doesn't have to be agenda driven. I think as exec search professionals inundated with so many inbound queries, I would also advise against persistently sort of reaching out to the same person. If for whatever reason you've not heard a response back, or you've not heard anything further to the previous communication that you had with that person, I think you should just take it easy. You should define sync points just like you would with a particular prospective client on when to circle back, etc., and then leave it at that. Seeming to be too keen, for lack of a better word, desperate, is not a great filter criteria in our minds as exec search professionals.
Yeah. So Gaurav, this was a lovely conversation. You unpacked a lot of secrets for us. I'm sure people listening in would take away, key insights about how to really navigate this journey of getting noticed by exec search professionals and pursue this as a good channel. Like if your career and your credentials are the product that you're selling in the market, this is a good channel to pursue and have some sure shot returns. But of course, as any other channel, this needs investment in terms of time, optimization of your profile, staying connected to the right set of people, not being desperate, trying to not really ping again and again. Be very controlled in terms of communication, but try to meet people in person, because Gaurav said he never forgets people that he meets in person. So with any research professional that you're building relationship, it's important to physically have some communication. And that should actually lay the right foundation for people to be noticed and get evaluated for roles. And then, of course, their competency takes over on how they navigate the rest of the journey for the job search. It was really lovely talking to you, Gaurav. Thank you so much for sparing the time and sharing this with my audience.
Pleasure is mine. I hope your audience finds it useful.
If this conversation made you pause, even briefly, then it did its job. Leadership isn't built through answers alone. It's built through better questions practiced over time. If you would like more conversations like this, subscribe to the channel. And if there's a question you're wrestling with right now, leave it in the comments. That's often where the next conversation begins.